Deep in the heart of the jungle, where life should be thriving, a cruel and senseless act has left a mother in chains, waiting for the inevitable. A mother's love knows no limits. Even as the walls of fate close in around her, she holds on to the only thing that matters, her babies. The ground trembles beneath her. A distant sound, faint at first, now grows louder. A whistle echoes through the air, cold, unfeeling, unstoppable. She knows there's no escape, no miracle, no mercy. She closes her eyes and waits for the end. The jungle was once her sanctuary, a place where the golden light of dawn filtered through the thick canopy, painting the world in hues of warmth and safety. She moved freely, her powerful limbs guiding her through the dense foliage, her infants clinging to her back with wide, curious eyes. Every morning, the air buzzed with life, the calls of distant birds, the rustling of leaves as her family foraged for food, the gentle grunts exchanged between her and her troop. She was their protector, their teacher, their world. Her infants played in the undergrowth, tumbling over one another, their soft, laughter-like sounds filling the air. She watched them with quiet pride, nudging them gently when they strayed too far. Every moment was a lesson: where to find the ripest fruit, how to climb with confidence, when to listen to the warning cries of the trees. The jungle provided for them, cradled them in its endless embrace, and in return, she nurtured the next generation of its guardians. Then, the peace shattered. A sudden chaos, loud and unnatural, tore through their world. The scent of men, sweat, metal, something sharp and foreign, invaded the air before she even saw them. Then came the nets, the shouting, the flashes of weapons raised high. Her troops scattered, the young ones shrieking as they were separated from their mothers. She roared, her instincts urging her to fight, to shield her infants from the hands that reached for them. She thrashed, kicked, bit, her strength unmatched, but the chains were stronger. A heavy blow struck her skull, and the world faded to black. When she woke, the jungle was gone. The soft earth beneath her was replaced by cold, unyielding metal. The sky above, once open and free, was now just a sliver beyond the bars of her prison. Her wrists and ankles bore deep cuts where the chains had rubbed raw, but none of it mattered. Her infants were still there, their tiny bodies pressed against hers, trembling. She pulled them close, her arms the only shield she had left. Days passed, or maybe weeks. The men who took her spoke in low, harsh tones, their eyes empty of pity. They prodded her, tested her strength, as if she were nothing more than a thing, a possession. She did not scream, she did not beg. She simply held her babies tighter, waiting for whatever fate they had planned. Then came the journey. The rattling of a cage, the jarring motion of transport, the scent of oil and smoke filling the air. She did not know where they were taking her. She only knew one thing. Whatever lay ahead, she would not let go of her babies. Not until her last breath. The cold bite of the metal pressed deeper into her skin with every movement. She pulled against the chains, testing them, but they did not yield. The weight of them was unforgiving, locking her in place as if the earth itself had turned against her. Her infants clung to her, their small fingers gripping her fur, their wide, innocent eyes searching hers for comfort. She let out a low, rumbling sound, a mother's promise that she was still here, that she would protect them. But even as she did, she knew the truth. The distant whistle pierced the silence, sharp and final. The ground trembled beneath them, a warning of what was to come. She turned her head toward the tracks, where the steel rails stretched endlessly into the distance. The air was thick, heavy, suffocating. She could hear it now, the low, rhythmic clatter of an approaching force too powerful to stop. The vibrations crawled up her spine, rattling her bones. She pulled again, her muscles straining, her breath coming in sharp bursts. The chains did not move. Her hands, powerful enough to bend branches and cradle her young, were useless against the cold, unyielding metal. She turned to her babies, pressing her forehead against theirs. One of them whimpered softly, the sound cutting through her like a blade. She let out a deep breath, slow and measured, forcing herself to stay calm. If this was to be their end, she would not let them feel fear. The train was closer now. The roar of it swallowed the jungle, drowning out the sounds of birds and rustling leaves. The wind carried the scent of burning metal and oil, foreign and unnatural. She had never feared storms or predators, never doubted her strength to defend her own. But this was something different. It did not see her. It did not care. She looked up at the sky, her chest rising and falling in slow acceptance. She had fought. She had tried. But some battles could not be won. Her grip on her infants tightened as she lowered her head, closing her eyes. The thunder of the train grew deafening. She braced herself, holding them close, her body their final shield. The air vibrated with the force of the oncoming train, a relentless, mechanical beast tearing through the jungle. The ground trembled beneath her, the metal rails humming with the weight of what was to come. The whistle shrieked again, louder this time, splitting through the silence like a jagged wound. The moment was near. She held her infants tighter, feeling the warmth of their small bodies pressed against her chest. Their tiny fingers gripped her fur, their hearts racing against hers. One of them whimpered. The other let out a soft, confused chirp. They did not understand. They did not know what was coming. She lowered her head, nuzzling them, whispering in the only way a mother could. Soft grunts, low vibrations, a final comfort before the inevitable. The train was close now, its massive form emerging from the curve in the tracks. The gleaming steel, the churning wheels, the towering engine, it was unstoppable. The roar of it filled the air, drowning out the jungle, drowning out her own heartbeat. She did not flinch. She did not cry out. There was nothing left to fight, nowhere left to run. She exhaled, long and deep, and closed her eyes. The world slowed, just for a moment. The wind brushed against her fur, carrying the scent of the trees, the earth, the life she had once known. She clung to it, to the feeling of her babies in her arms, to the last fleeting warmth of existence. The train thundered forward. The final breath of silence hung between the moment and the end. A sudden roar cut through the chaos, not from the train, but from the jungle itself. A burst of movement, a blur of figures racing toward the tracks. Shouts echoed through the air, urgent, desperate. The world, once frozen in the grip of inevitability, snapped back into motion. A figure leaped forward, hands gripping the rusted chains, pulling, straining. Another rushed to the tracks, waving frantically at the oncoming train. The screech of brakes filled the air, metal grinding against metal in protest. Sparks flew as the beast of iron fought against its own momentum, the wheels skidding, screaming against the rails. The mother lifted her head, eyes wide, heart pounding. Rough hands fumbled with the locks, frantic voices overlapping, a battle between time and fate. The chains groaned, pulled taut, resisting even now. Her infants clung to her, their small bodies trembling as the tremors of the slowing train rippled through the ground. A final, desperate pull, a snap. The chains loosened. She stumbled forward, momentarily weightless, the grip of captivity finally broken. Arms wrapped around her, guiding her, pushing her off the tracks, away from the looming shadow of the engine still bearing down on them. The train thundered past, mere inches from where she had just stood. Wind and dust exploded around her, but she did not move. Her chest heaved, her mind still catching up to what had just happened. Her babies whimpered against her, confused but safe. The rescuers stood around her, their faces filled with exhaustion and relief. Someone reached out cautiously, offering her space, offering her freedom. She did not run. She did not cower. She simply looked at them, the weight of survival settling deep in her bones. She was alive. Against all odds, she was alive. The jungle was quiet again, but not the same. The air, once thick with fear and desperation, now carried something new, something fragile, yet powerful. Hope. She moved slowly, her muscles still stiff from the weight of the chains. Her infants clung to her, their tiny hands wrapped tightly around her fur, as if afraid she might disappear. She let out a soft rumble, reassuring them, reminding them she was here. She was still theirs. She was still their mother. The rescuers watched in silence, giving her space. There was no force, no cage, no ropes to bind her. Only open land, the scent of the jungle calling her back. She turned, glancing at the ones who had pulled her from the jaws of death. They had no fur, no familiar scent, nothing that belonged to her world. And yet, they had fought for her, as if her life mattered, as if her children's lives mattered. She did not understand them, not in the way she understood the whisper of the leaves or the distant calls of her kind. But she understood kindness. She understood mercy. And that was enough. With one last look, she stepped forward, her movements slow but steady. The jungle opened before her, its towering trees welcoming her home. The earth felt different beneath her feet, softer, forgiving. For the first time in what felt like forever, she was walking toward something, not away. Her infants stirred against her, their small voices chirping with curiosity. She nuzzled them, urging them forward. There was still a life to live, a future to find. The past would not hold them, not anymore. And as the last rays of the sun stretched through the trees, the mother and her babies disappeared into the wild, where they belonged. This was more than just a rescue. It was a reminder of the cruelty that still exists, the silent suffering that so many endure, but also a reminder of something greater, the power of compassion, the difference a single act of courage can make. Somewhere, right now, another mother is in chains. Another family is being torn apart. The fight is not over. It won't be, until the wild is no longer a place of fear, until these creatures no longer have to run, hide, or brace for the end. But there is hope. Hope in those who choose to stand, who choose to fight, who refuse to look away. This mother was saved because someone cared, because someone refused to let her story end in tragedy. And now, you can be part of that fight. Share her story. Speak for those who cannot. Support the efforts of those risking everything to protect the wild. Because every life matters, every rescue counts, and together, we can ensure that no mother, no child, no innocent creature ever has to face this kind of fate again. The jungle still calls. Let's make sure they're there to answer.